What happens when a cherished British icon walks into what should have been a light-hearted daytime chat, only to face one of the most humiliating moments of his career? In just 36 seconds, one question would turn Sir Cliff Richard from a gracious guest into a man defending his entire legacy, and Denise Welch from seasoned presenter into, for a time, the most disliked woman on British television. The ITV studios buzzed with their usual midday chatter as Sir Cliff made his way down the corridor toward the Loose Women's set. At 73, the legendary singer was there to promote his upcoming tour, a celebration of decades in the industry. What awaited him that Tuesday afternoon would instead become one of the most talked-about moments in British TV history. Cliff took his seat, offering that familiar, reassuring smile to the panel. At the center sat Denise Welch, with Nadia Sawalha, Linda Robson, and Kay Adams beside her. The air should have been warm and nostalgic, but from the moment Denise met Cliff's eyes, there was something sharp, almost icy, behind her smile. "So, Cliff," she began, her tone deceptively casual. "Here you are again, still performing at your age. Don't you think it's time to hang up the microphone and let someone younger take the spotlight?" the audience murmured. The words landed like a slap. Cliff's smile faltered for only a moment before he steadied himself. "That old professionalism kicking in. Well, Denise," he replied softly, "as long as people still want to hear me sing, and I'm able to do it, I don't see why age should matter. Music doesn't have an expiry date." He smiled again, but there was tension now. Nadia shifted uncomfortably, trying to smooth things over. "I think what's incredible," she interjected, "is how you've maintained your voice and your passion for so many years." But Denise wasn't finished. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That's all very romantic, Nadia. But let's be honest, Cliff. Your last few albums were commercial disasters. The charts are full of artists who weren't even born when you started. Isn't this just ego at this point?" Gasps rippled through the studio. Even the camera crew hesitated. Linda Robson's mouth fell open. Kay Adams looked like she wanted to disappear behind her cue cards. Cliff straightened his posture. "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. My fans, many of whom have supported me for 50 years, still come to my shows, still buy my music. I'm proud of that." "Oh, come on," Denise shot back, her voice rising. "Your last album barely cracked the top 50. You're clinging to glory days that weren't that glorious to begin with," the audience murmured again, some in disbelief. Cliff's expression changed, not angry, but quietly wounded. "Denise," he said carefully, "I came here to talk about my new tour, to connect with the people who have supported me for decades. I'm not sure why you're attacking me instead." "Attacking?" Denise laughed, though the sound was cold. "This is called honest journalism, Cliff. Maybe you're just not used to someone being truthful with you." "Denise," Linda interjected firmly, "maybe we should move on and talk about the tour." But Denise ignored her, leaning in further. "You know what really bothers me about performers like you? You take up space that should go to new talent. You've had your moment. Why not bow out gracefully and let someone else have theirs?" The words hit the air like poison. Cliff blinked, the color draining slightly from his face. A lifetime of composure couldn't quite mask the hurt in his eyes. "I think," he said quietly, "every artist deserves to be treated with basic respect, no matter their age, no matter where they are in their career. I've never stood in anyone's way. I've only ever tried to share music with the people who want to hear it." For a moment, the studio was utterly silent. Even Denise seemed taken aback by the weight of his words. Kay Adams finally spoke, her voice tight and low. Let's move on, shall we?" But everyone in the room knew the damage was already done. Kay Adams tried to steer things back to safety. "Sir Cliff, perhaps we could talk about your charitable work instead. You've raised millions for various causes over the years." But before Cliff could answer, Denise cut in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh yes, the charity angle. Another way to stay relevant, isn't it? Nothing like a bit of public generosity to keep your name in the papers when the music isn't doing it anymore. The air was sucked out of the room. For a heartbeat, there was silence. And then the studio erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, even a few boos from the back rows. One audience member shouted, "That's disgusting!" Cliff's face went from pale to flushed red. For the first time, his composure cracked. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. Not from anger, but disbelief. "My charitable work. Are you seriously suggesting that helping sick children and supporting causes I believe in is just a publicity stunt? Do you have any idea how offensive that is?" Nadia Sawalha looked horrified. She turned sharply toward Denise. "Denise, you've gone way too far. Sir Cliff has helped countless people. How dare you question his motives? I'll question whatever I like." Denise snapped, eyes flashing. "This is my show. If Cliff can't handle a few hard questions, maybe he shouldn't be here." "Hard questions?" Linda Robson's voice rose for the first time. "These aren't questions, Denise. This is cruelty. You're being absolutely vile to a guest who came here in good faith." Denise turned on her colleague, fury in her face. "Don't you dare tell me how to do my job, Linda. I'm not here to stroke egos and toss softballs at has-beens." The word hit Cliff like a physical blow. He recoiled slightly, his mouth parting in shock. For a long moment, he didn't speak at all. Then Kay Adams stood up, something almost unheard of during a live broadcast. Her voice trembled with anger. "Denise, I can't sit here and watch you humiliate a guest like this. Sir Cliff, on behalf of the show, I'm so deeply sorry for this treatment." "Sit down, Kay," Denise ordered, her tone ice-cold. "Don't apologize for me doing what real journalists should do." "Real journalists?" Cliff finally spoke. And this time, there was steel in his tone. "Real journalists ask tough questions, yes, but they don't mock, they don't humiliate, and they don't try to destroy someone's dignity for entertainment." A ripple of applause broke out. Hesitant at first, then building until nearly the whole audience was clapping. Denise's jaw tightened. She raised her voice over the noise. "Oh, playing the victim now, are we? The great Sir Cliff Richard, reduced to begging for sympathy from a daytime TV crowd." That was the moment Cliff stood. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his chair. 73 years old, but towering in quiet authority. The room fell into absolute silence. "I have been in this business for over 50 years, he said, voice calm but quivering with emotion. "I've faced the toughest interviewers in the world, about my career, my life, everything. But I have never been treated with such unprofessional cruelty as I have today." Denise opened her mouth to interrupt, but Cliff held up a hand. "I'm not finished," he said firmly. "You've questioned my relevance, mocked my age, dismissed my music, and, worst of all, insulted my charitable work as nothing more than a stunt. You've shown complete contempt, not just for me, but for the millions who've supported me through the years." The panel sat frozen. Nadia's eyes were wet with tears. Linda was nodding furiously. Kay remained standing, arms folded, defying Denise's glare. "I came here to share my joy about returning to the stage," Cliff continued, "to talk about a tour that thousands are looking forward to. Instead, I've had to defend my career and my right to exist as an artist." "Are you quite finished with your little speech?" Denise muttered, but her tone had lost its bite. The audience's energy had turned completely against her. Cliff looked her straight in the eye. "You know what saddens me most, Denise? It's not the insults. I've endured worse than you could ever throw. What saddens me is the message this sends. That somewhere, a young artist might be watching and think this is how our industry treats people. That cruelty and humiliation are acceptable." Applause thundered again, louder this time. Some audience members stood up cheering. In the control room, producers shouted over one another. desperate to decide whether to cut to commercial. Denise's face flushed crimson. The applause wasn't supposed to be for him. "Well," she snapped, grasping for control, "if you're so upset about being challenged, maybe you should just stick to playing to your little fan clubs," Denise sneered. "Where everyone tells you how wonderful you are." Cliff exhaled softly, shaking his head. "There it is again," he said quietly. "The contempt. Not just for me, but for the people who enjoy my music. You're not attacking me, Denise. You're attacking every person who's ever found joy in a song I've sung. You're dismissing their memories, their feelings, their experiences as worthless." Nadia Sawalha could no longer sit still. She turned directly toward the cameras, her voice clear and steady. "I want everyone watching to know. This does not represent the values of this show or this panel. Sir Cliff Richard is a gentleman and a legend. He deserves so much better than this." "Nadia, you're out of line," Denise snapped, but her voice wavered. Her authority was slipping fast. "No," said Linda Robson firmly, also facing the camera. "Nadia's right. This is disgraceful, and I'm ashamed to be sitting here." Cliff glanced toward the three women who had defended him. His expression softened. "Thank you, ladies," he said quietly. "Your kindness means more than you know. But I think it's clear I'm not welcome here." He began to remove his microphone, slow and deliberate. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. "Running away?" Denise called out, desperate now. "I thought you were supposed to be tougher than this." Cliff paused, the mic halfway off. He looked at her, not angry, just deeply disappointed. "Tougher than this?" he repeated softly. "Denise, I've survived 5 decades in an industry that can be brutal. I've endured personal attacks, professional setbacks, and public scrutiny that would break most people. But I've never confused cruelty with strength. And I've never mistaken bullying for toughness." The studio fell silent. You could hear the low hum of the cameras. Everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Real toughness," Cliff continued, his voice growing steadier, "is treating people with respect, even when you disagree with them. Real strength is lifting others up, not tearing them down. What you've done here today isn't tough, Denise. It's just sad." Denise's face drained of color, then flushed red. The audience's reaction, murmurs, nods, a few claps, was clearly shaking her. "Don't you dare lecture me about strength," she snapped. "You don't know anything about what I've been through." "You're right," Cliff replied softly. "I don't know your struggles, just as you don't know mine. But I would never use my pain as an excuse to cause more of it. That's the difference between us." The cameras caught every flicker across Denise's face. Anger, humiliation, and something dangerously close to shame. Kay Adams stepped closer to Cliff, her voice gentle. "Sir Cliff, please don't let this experience taint your view of our show, or this network. This isn't who we are." "I know it isn't, Kay," Cliff said kindly. "You three have shown nothing but grace. It's clear this behavior doesn't reflect your values." Linda Robson was crying openly now. "I'm so sorry, Sir Cliff," she said through tears. "You deserve better than this." "We all do," the audience began to murmur. Not in shock this time, but in solidarity. A wave of warmth spread through the room. Someone shouted from the back, "We love you, Cliff." Denise's eyes darted nervously around the studio. The room had turned completely against her. And then, in a last-ditch attempt to reclaim control, she made the fatal mistake. "Well," she said bitterly, "at least when I'm forgotten, it'll be because I stood for something real. Not because I spent my career singing lightweight pop songs that meant nothing to anyone." The words hit like an explosion. The audience's reaction was instant and visceral. People were shouting now, some standing, others pointing toward Denise in disbelief. "How dare you!" a woman screamed from the second row. But Cliff didn't flinch. His expression wasn't angry. It was heartbreakingly calm, a quiet, almost spiritual disappointment. "Denise," he said softly, his voice carrying even through the chaos, "I genuinely feel sorry for you. To live with that much bitterness, that need to tear others down. It must be exhausting." The simplicity of his words silenced the room. Even Denise seemed to shrink under the weight of them. Her defiance faltered, and for the first time all afternoon she looked small, lost, taking in the hostile faces of the audience, the disappointed looks from her co-hosts, and the relentless cameras that had captured her downfall in real time. Nadia Sawalha rose from her chair and crossed the floor toward Cliff, her expression solemn. "Sir Cliff," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "please accept my personal apology, and the apology of everyone who still believes in treating our guests with dignity and respect." Cliff's eyes softened. "Of course I do, Nadia. Your kindness through this whole ordeal has been a light in a very dark moment." The audience erupted in thunderous applause. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was decisive, cathartic, and loud enough to drown out the hum of the studio lights. Their message was unmistakable. They stood with him. Denise sat motionless at the presenter's desk, alone in the center of the chaos. The applause that once fueled her authority now isolated her completely. Cliff glanced around the room one final time, taking in the faces of those still cheering. He lifted his hand in a modest wave, and the applause swelled even louder. "To everyone watching at home," he said, turning to face the camera directly, "please remember, kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything. Don't let anyone tell you that cruelty is strength, or that tearing people down somehow builds you up. We can all do better than that." He set down his microphone, nodded once, and began walking toward the exit. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the entire studio. The 3 remaining panelists joined in, their faces a mixture of admiration for Cliff and quiet shame for their colleague. At the edge of the set, Cliff paused and turned back, not toward Denise, but toward the crowd who had defended him. He placed a hand over his heart in a simple gesture of gratitude. The gesture alone drew tears from several audience members. Denise sat frozen, her eyes locked on the empty chair he'd left behind. She had tried to humiliate him, but it was her own reputation that had been dismantled. The man she'd dismissed as a relic had just given a masterclass in grace. The camera lingered on her face as realization dawned. She hadn't just lost control of an interview. She'd become a symbol of everything hollow and cruel in modern media. Silence fell across the studio. No one dared speak. Finally, Kay Adams stepped forward and said quietly, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll be discussing the importance of respect, both on and off this stage." As the show cut to commercial, the audience buzzed with disbelief. Some shook their heads. Others whispered angrily about what they'd just seen. The last image before the fade-out was haunting. Denise Welch sitting alone at the desk, her head bowed into her hands, while beside her, the empty chair where Sir Cliff Richard had sat stood like a monument to dignity in the face of cruelty. The entertainer who'd entered the studio as a beloved singer had left as something greater, a living emblem of grace under fire, of kindness triumphing over malice, and of the quiet, enduring truth that real strength lies not in tearing others down, but in rising above.